Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. I'm Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Folks, my guest this week is an author and filmmaker whose works include the book House of Psychotic Women and the documentary Woodlands, Dark and Days Bewitched, both essential works in the realm of horror. She's also the writer and director of the new short, The Occupant of the Room, a classic ghost story, which you can watch right now on Shudder. Please welcome to the show. I'm very excited to welcome Kier-La Janisse. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. First question. Congratulations on the short. I really enjoyed it. I am a huge
Thank you.
fan of ghost stories at Christmas time. What was sort of the impetus, the kind of spark that got you to want to make this for this year?
Well, originally, this story in particular, The Occupant of the Room, is a story that I read every year
Mm,
on Christmas Eve. So it's like when I have people, I usually try to rope people in, to come over on Christmas Eve and have kind of an informal Christmas gathering where we just sit around and tell ghost stories, usually reading. I mean, some people just tell their own personal ghost stories,
mhm,
but I tend to like read classic ghost stories and but I always read the same story. I always read this story every year, Algernon Blackwood's The Occupant of the Room. And when I first read it, it was just because I was looking for a really short story, and it's only like a 9-page story. But then something in it just felt very personal to me. It just felt like, oh, I chose this story for a reason because there's elements of this story that speak to me, and when it came time to do the haunted season episode, which was an opportunity that presented itself because we originally had a different writer and director
mm,
involved doing a different film, like they were going to be doing a totally different adaptation, and then she ended up getting greenlit for her and like a feature project that she was working on got greenlit for like another stage of development or something like that. There was some reason why she couldn't do it. And so um I initially thought of trying to find someone to replace her, but I felt like this is already so late in the game. It's just not really fair to anyone that I would ask now because already the series is a very low budget series. So to also give them no time to plan their
mm.
episode is like a double whammy, So I just thought, no, maybe I will try because I have this story now baked into my DNA. I'm gonna see if, maybe I could make a ghost story for Christmas, and everything about it was scary to me because I'd never written a script, I'd never worked with actors, the only times I'd ever been on a set was when I worked at Fangoria and I would hang out at the craft services table. Um, like I did not have a lot of experience even on a film set, So, everything about it was new. And so, uh, I, made sure that I had some people around me who knew what they were doing. So my executive producers, first of all, Severin Films, and then also Rob Cotterill, who is a Canadian producer who did like Kobo with a Shotgun and a
Mm.
bunch of Brandon Cronenberg films and stuff like that. So I had them as executive producers, and then my DP, Kareem Hussein, is a very, very experienced and respected cinematographer, but he's also one of my oldest friends. So he was willing to work on my little rinky dink movie that normally would be way below his pay grade. Um, but as out of friends, out of friendship, he agreed to do it. And he's also was ended up being a huge creative collaborator on the film because not only did he pretty much act as like the first AD, the continuity person, the camera operator, the DP, like he played so many roles in the movie. Um, like he's not officially the first AD, but he was kind of like my best friend on set, so he was kind of unofficially the first AD. Um, but then also I stayed with him while we were shooting, and so we went over the shot list and we watched movies together to
Mm.
prepare for it. So it was really like he got very, very into the headspace, that he needed to be in. And so that was the thing. I just sort of supported myself with people that I knew had a lot of experience and wouldn't let me completely fail, but who would support my vision, who
Right.
sort of trusted my taste and would let me make my own decisions, but also make, wouldn't let me fall on my face, like they wouldn't, Yeah. So I knew I had a good sort of network of people around me, and that was really what gave me the confidence to try it.
Mm,
And it was a fascinating experience, from beginning to end, like writing dialogue for the first time, working with trying to direct an actor who was like when I was a teenager. Um, I was a teenager when Road Bruce McDonald's Roadkill came out, and Don McKellar is the lead actor in that movie. And so to me, Don McKellar is like one of these actors that has always been a part of my life since I discovered alternative film. Um, and so to be directing someone who has that level of experience is a daunting prospect. But he's also worked with a lot of young directors before, so
mm.
he's obviously very supportive of like emerging talents and stuff like that. So he was great to work with. So yeah, so
I I was kind of surprised to find that, although it's not surprising because I don't remember having seen very much, but that Blackwood is not particularly like there's not a lot of film adaptations of Blackwood at all,
no.
which is so strange because reading Blackwood is very
Mm,
it's very cinematic when you read it.
mhm,
So what was sort of your what were the challenges? What was sort of your process to
mhm.
adapting Blackwood to the screen
Well,
without having a ton
yeah,
of stuff to look at before? You know,
I think he's actually been more adapted for radio,
I'm
you know.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And part of the reason for that is that, you know, many of his stories are kind of narrated from within a protagonist's head
Mm,
and are describing events as he feels them, like so in The Occupant of the Room, so much other than the like small exchange with the hotel porter and the proprietress at the beginning of the short story. The rest of the film is one character alone in a hotel room, feeling things. And
right.
so it's like, so that can be that obviously was the biggest challenge of doing this story, was that I knew that like many directors would make the choice to use a voiceover narration,
Mm,
to show how he's feeling. And I didn't want to do that because I feel like voiceovers, like I can deal with a voiceover, but they become kind of soporific after a while, where they're sort of like lulling you too much. Um, and so I didn't want to have a voiceover, or I didn't want to rely on one. So there are sections of the film where there is a section of the film that has some voiceover, um, but I didn't want to be relying on it for like all the exposition or anything like that. And so the challenge was like, how do I externalize or manifest the things that this person is feeling? But that also became the most exciting thing about doing that story, was because Blackwood is such a great storyteller. I felt like I could picture things, like when he has the description of there's a couple episodes where the character Minturn sort of like goes into this depression, but there's one in particular, there's one sort of long one, before the climax of the story, where there's so much kind of um it's like there's so much emotion that he's describing how he is being overtaken by this black weight of a depression. And I felt like I could animate that.
mm,
Like, well, not me personally, I'm not the animator, but I felt like that could be animated. And it was like if I did it with a certain style, which I saw as being something that involved paper, something involved like ripped and torn and broken paper, that had sort of a photographic basis rather than an illustrated style. I felt like I could create um, that episode that he goes into. And so a lot of putting together the movie came down to finding the right collaborators. And Anna Molina, who is the animator of that sequence, is somebody that I found. I was like, okay, I want collage, paper collage, I want black and white, I want somebody who works with wrinkling and tearing and ripping and stuff like this. And so I just typed in random keywords into Google or into Instagram, and I found her account that way. So I just found her on Instagram.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, and then I contacted her and I said, you know, because her whole page was like 2-second gifs. It was very short loops, you know? And so I was like, this is exactly what I want, but she's making gifs, you know, like I
Right.
need something that's longer. And so I just contacted her and I said, you know, could you do longer pieces than 2 seconds or whatever? And she was just like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, as long as I have the footage to work with." She's like, "Those 2-second GIFs are because I'm working with a still image," you
Mm.
know? She's like, "But if I have footage and I can have, like, actually all the frames that make up the movement and everything, then I can, you know, do the longer pieces." And it turned out that she had read my book, House of Psychotic Women, so she was, like, you know, happy to work on the film. And then the musician who did the music, she did
Which
the
the
score.
music in, I should say, is incredible. Like, boy, just watching, Don McKellar walk through the house with the music kind of going, it's just like,
Yeah,
this is a ghost story. This is like, it
yeah,
just feels like it. But yeah,
thank
please
you.
talk about finding the composer.
Yeah, so the composer, her name's Anju Singh. She's Canadian, and she's got a noise project called The Nausea. And I had heard The Nausea, and one of the songs, the song that is actually during the animation sequence, is a pre-existing song from a couple of years ago. And so I actually was always picturing that scene happening with that music playing. And so I hired Andrew Singh even before the movie was shot, you know, because wanted her to, I just wanted her involved with the project from the beginning, you know, so that I could kind of send music to the actors and the animator and everybody so they'd kind of get a sense of like what it would sound like. And it turned out that the animator, when I sent her the music, I said, the animated sequence that you're doing will have this music. And she said, "I know this music." And I was like, "What? How?" Like, because Andrew Singh is, you know, she's kind of an emerging artist. She's not
Right.
like a hugely famous artist or anything. She said, "No, this girl came to the town where I live and performed. I saw her play in a church like a year ago or whatever." And I was like, what are the chances of that?" So it kind of turned out perfectly that like the animator, the composer, and me clearly had this aesthetic connection. Like
Yeah.
we were like, all right, we are all on the same page here, you know? And so that was huge, you know? So it was like, even when we were shooting the film with the actors and everything, like I already had these people waiting in the wings for the footage to work with, you know, like so we already knew what it was gonna sound like. We already knew what the animation was gonna look like. Um, and then I just had to film stuff so that I could send the animator footage to work with. Um, but yeah, great
Um,
collaborators.
Absolutely. I also want to ask about the house that you, or, the hotel, I guess.
Yeah.
Where is that? And, uh,
Yes.
how hard was it to find like because that's such a huge part of ghost stories is
Yeah.
like the setting and the atmosphere and everything.
Yeah. Well, it's not real. It's a set.
Yeah. I wondered. I didn't want to assume, but
Yeah. So the interior is a set that we built in Mississauga, which is outside of Toronto. So
okay.
it's like it's like a suburb of Toronto. And so we got a hold of this film studio that was kind of small. It was too small for like a big production. And it wasn't 100% soundproof, which meant that a lot of big productions would never a lot of productions just
Mm.
wouldn't use it because if it started raining or something, you could hear the rain on the roof and stuff like that. Um, and so we were able to get it pretty affordably. And they had a bunch of standing flats already. So they had walls that we could move around. We didn't have to build the walls. So that was a huge expense saved, you know. Um, so we were able to do things like move things and move the doors and, you know, change windows and whatever. But the actual walls were structures that were there that were built. And and then for the exterior, you know, so in the hotel lobby, for instance, I had drawn a picture of what I wanted the layout of the lobby to be, and I had this staircase that kind of came down on an angle, and then the porter's desk is like underneath the staircase. And this set did not have a staircase, you know, so we were going to have to build that staircase. And everybody was just like, "Oh God, you know, we have no money. We don't have money to build a staircase." And so I kept thinking they were going to try to convince me to like lose the staircase, and I just wouldn't. I just would not. I was like, we need to figure out a way to do the staircase because that is how I picture this room. And so the staircase is made out of styrofoam. So yeah, so they made that whole staircase with banisters and everything. It's all made out of styrofoam.
That's incredible.
So the whole time we had these signs on it saying like "not real, do not touch." And it was like if somebody touched the banister, the whole thing would collapse.
That's so good.
And then the exterior is composited. The exterior of the hotel is composited from photographs. So basically,
Mm.
there is a real hotel that the exterior is based on, which is a hotel in Colombia called the Hotel Salto, and it's a hotel that's right on the edge of a cliff where there's a big waterfall. And the hotel was abandoned for a long time, so there were all kinds of pictures. If you looked on Pinterest at like
Oh,
old
yeah.
abandoned buildings and stuff, you would find these pictures of this hotel covered with moss and everything. And I was like, and it was supposedly also like a famous suicide hotel where people
Sure.
would go there and then jump into the waterfall
Oh,
and
it's, like,
stuff.
right off a road, too.
Yeah,
I'm looking at pictures of it now. Yeah.
yeah.
That's wild.
And yeah, so the exterior of my hotel is based on that hotel. So we basically
Cool.
had to take that hotel, we had to put it into the mountains. Um, but also there were no high res photographs. I mean, there are high res photographs of it now because it's been renovated and it's
Right.
all painted white. And I mean, it just doesn't look this now. It looks like a nice building.
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah.
didn't it didn't have like we couldn't get a high res picture of it where it looks like all gnarly and stuff. So we had to basically create it digitally. And so Ashley Thorpe, who did a bunch of the animation on my Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched film, he actually did all the compositing work to build the hotel and create a couple different angles of it, using different pictures of like using low res pictures of it basically that we found on Google. And so he built that hotel in the Alps, and he built the mountains around it and the snow and everything like that. But it's based on that hotel in Colombia.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. Like, it's just it evokes exactly what you would want
yeah,
from a story like this.
yeah.
That's um, I think I've said this on the show before, but if not, I'll say it again. But, that, uh, I have, for the last several years, not been into Christmas. I've been very, like, I'm like, "Your rampant cheerfulness, get out of here," kinda thing. But then, like, maybe a decade ago or so now, I was like, being American, we don't have a history of Christmas ghost stories really, other than A Christmas Carol. Um, but, learning that that is such a big part of the UK tradition and I suppose Commonwealths as well, but, like, really was like, "Oh, great, you can still be spooky at Christmas time." Like, it really, like,
Yeah,
spoke to me. So, like, how did you discover
yeah,
ghost stories at Christmas time? Why did you
yeah.
obviously make a thing out of it every year, so, like.
Yeah, so I didn't know about that tradition until like 2012.
Sure.
I was in the UK visiting a friend of mine, and we watched one. He just said something about the ghost. He's like, "Oh, you've never seen the ghost stories for Christmas or whatever." And it was actually Sean Hogan who directed the first film in the
Oh,
haunted
yeah.
season last year.
Right.
So he's a big part of this story for me of like how I became interested in all this stuff, and that's partially why he made the first film in the series. Um, but so he sort of introduced me to that tradition and was telling me about how when he was a kid, he would watch them with his family and he'd get to stay up late. And I was just like so jealous. I was like, oh, I wish we had that, I would have been all over that tradition. And so that was really when the seed was hatched for the haunted season, because at the time I worked for Fangoria on the website, me and Sam Zimmerman were the web editors. So I went back, talked to Sam, and I was like, we got to do a ghost story for Christmas for the Fangoria website. We got to make like a $5,000 movie and we'll sell ads. And Rebecca McKendry was the ad salesperson at the time. So Rebecca was on board and she was going to like, yeah, if we sell this many ads and whatever, then we could do. And we thought we'll have like we'll just have commercials play before the movie and that's how we'll fund the movie. And we went to the publisher It was totally this is like 3 publishers ago, and he was like, "Why would I do that? No, why would I spend my money on that?" And we're like, "No, but you wouldn't have to. The idea is that we sell ads and then the ads pay for it." He's like, "Yeah, but if ad money comes in, that's my money. Why would I spend it making this movie?" And we're just like, "Because it would be a really cool thing to have on the Fangoria
And also,
website."
that's what they're spending ad money on. Like, you wouldn't just get like there has to be something for them to put money on.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so he just didn't understand the logic of, like, how he would lose money out of this or something. So
Right.
anyway, the idea was rejected, and then me and Sam were very depressed, and then years later, I'm at Severin Films, he's at Shudder doing acquisitions, and then I said to my boss at Severin, David Gregory, I said, um, we had started making Sean's film. Like we were just going to make it as a short film. And before the film was even done, I think I saw some stills, from the set, and I was like, "Oh, this looks so good." And I went to David and I said, "If this film turns out good, what do you think about the idea of pitching Shudder on letting us produce an annual ghost story for Christmas type series?" And David was like, "Well, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with it, but if you want to do it, go ahead." So then I went to Sam, and it was basically like, "This is the idea that we were talking about all those years ago, and now we're both in a position where we might actually be able to do it." So that was kind of like how the idea for the haunted season came about. And then the one thing I wanted to do to differentiate this series from the BBC series is something that they have actually since addressed, which is that they are using different writers, like they're
Right.
using different authors' works now. For a while it was always M.R. James, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had different authors, that we're referencing and adapting all the time, so that people can learn about all the different writers who are writing these stories. But then also have different writers and directors for the episodes each time, and do it in a different country each time, so that we can even get like international ghost stories like Jean
Right.
Ray or whoever, like all these other ghost stories from other countries. And so that was kind of the pitch. And then, yeah, that was sort of like, yeah, Sean Hogan gets the blame for this obsession, really. But Christmas, I mean, I did a book called Yuletide Terror in 2017 that was like a history of Christmas ghost stories. It was like an anthology of sorry, not Christmas ghost stories, Christmas horror in general. So
Mm,
it was like horror, so it was ghost stories, but also slasher films, Santa
right.
slasher type stuff, um, violent thrillers that take place at Christmas and all this kind of stuff. And so the Christmas thing is something that, even aside from the ghost stories, I've delved into a bit in my career. And as you say, if you're not into the cheery aspects of this Christmas, this provides a nice flip side to that, um, where you still have something that you can look forward to every year at
Yeah.
Christmas, even if you're not into all the traditional Christmas stuff.
For the last, well, my wife, her family is from Northern California, and I'm here in Southern California, and so she will fly up early to go to like her family's house for Christmas. And for the last several years, I have driven up the coast and put on an audiobook of a ghost story or some sort of horror, chilly, spooky book, and that has
Mhm.
been my tradition. And it's driving up through the fog of Northern California. It's the best. It is.
Yeah,
I want everyone out there who feels similarly to like do that,
yeah,
because it just is it puts you in the mindset, and it's like, okay, you guys can be cheery. I'm going to listen to my EF Benson or whatever,
yeah,
you know. Um
yeah.
do you have so what were some of the things that you and your DP watched to kind of get you in the visual mindset for the film?
Yeah, so I mean, of the original book Ghost Stories for Christmas, it was really the Stalls of Barchester, the very first one.
Love it.
Uh
Yeah,
that
it's so cool looking.
yeah, for like the lighting. So the lighting was ins- inspired a lot by that episode in particular. But then there was also there was a film that, when I made my deck, sort of pitching the look of the film and everything, there's a film called The Whisperers by Brian Forbes, who
Oh
it's
shoot, have
like
I seen?
late 60s film. It's not a horror film. It's like a drama about an old lady who lives in this apartment, and she's convinced that she's hearing voices coming out of the radiator and stuff. And so she spends a lot of time alone in her apartment, just being very paranoid and anxious. Um, And so that was an important reference, like, for a
Mm.
lot of not just the idea of, like, how does an actor carry this? Like, how does an actor carry this being alone all this time on screen and be able to engage people, you know? Um, but then also just the way that she was framed by things in her apartment to kind of emphasize her discomfort. So that was a big influence. And there was an episode Avengers episode, which I also watch. I don't watch it every Christmas, but I watch it many Christmases. This Avengers episode called "Too Many Christmas Trees," and it's where John Steed has this night. He keeps having this recurring nightmare of being in this like weird artificial forest, and this like laughing, creepy Santa who's giving him messages about people that are going to die. Um, and then he gets invited to this party at this big manor house in the country that's like a Dickens themed party where everybody is assigned to be a different character from a Dickens story and has like a costume that's already been tailored to them mysteriously, to be these different characters. And it's all basically this trap. Even the nightmare is like part of this trap. And but that had lots of stuff in it that I was looking at, and weirdly, I found out after looking them up that that and The Whisperers had the same cinematographer.
Oh my gosh.
So it
What?
was like, yeah, this guy named Jerry Turpin. So he was the cinematographer on both the Avengers episode I liked and The Whisperers. And I was like, wow, okay. So clearly I like how this guy shoots films.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, he was
um,
also a camera up on Peeping Tom. So
yeah,
like
yeah.
classy
Oh, yeah, he
stuff.
has many other
Yeah, yeah,
credits. It
yeah.
was just, like, those 2 in particular, I thought, "How funny," like, that I picked these 2 movies as influences, and they're both shot by the same guy.
Totally.
Um,
That's I have not seen The
yeah.
Whispers. That sounds like a really interesting movie.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. I mean, it's like Dame Edith Evans, who's the character, and she's fantastic. But it's just, like, kind of a downbeat story of a lonely old woman, you know? Um, but it's great.
there is a level, and one of the things I like about ghost stories as opposed to, that sets it apart, I think, from other types of horror, is that there is this level of like sadness and kind of lonely desperation to it, and which you hit on very well in your film. But um,
Mhm.
what is it, I guess, about? I mean, that is something obviously that you picked up on as well. But
Yeah.
what is it about those stories? Why is sadness, kind of intrinsically linked to that type of story? Why does it work so well?
To what kind of story? Like,
Sorry, for ghost
Christmas
stories
or
specifically. I maybe not Christmas, although Christmas is a sad time, I
yeah.
think, for a lot of people, but, like.
I mean, in terms of ghost stories, like, I mean, usually the fact that there is a ghost at all
Right,
often implies that 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 there has been some sort of communication breakdown. Somebody, in most ghost stories or ghost theory or whatever, the idea is that the ghost is there because they have some unfinished business or they have something that they haven't communicated yet that they need to communicate, And I feel like this feeling of not being able to communicate with other people is something that plagues a lot of living people as
right.
well. Like,
Yeah.
so I feel like that's a big appeal of ghost stories, and part of what imbues them with that sadness is that sense that, like, articulating your thoughts to other people is so fraught, and that to know that even beyond the grave, you'll still be trying to communicate this thing, and your spirit will be unsettled because you haven't been able to have a basically like a witness for your story.
Mm,
And that was a big part of what the occupant of the room, what was important to me is that the character of Minturn is essentially a witness, you know, and and that's also a big part of what makes it sad, because he obviously has to have a certain receptiveness that's already there. Usually that's how it works. People
mm,
who see ghosts are people who have some sort of receptiveness, right? So in order to be like overtaken by the English woman's depression and stuff like that, there has to be something of that in him already. There has to be something of that loneliness and stuff. Um, and so, yeah, I think just in general, ghost stories have that sense of melancholy just because it often often they exist because of things that have been left unsaid, you know? And yeah.
Do you have, other than, The Occupant of the Room, do you have other favorite, ghost stories that you like to read, or that you could recommend to our listeners or anything like that?
Yeah, there's I don't know if that'll be as funny to people outside of Canada. Um, but Robertson Davies, who's a Canadian author who um he wrote ghost stories for Christmas the same way that M.R. James did. So he would write them for his school every year, like for the faculty and the students. He would tell this ghost story every year in a very similar way that M.R. James did. And And so then he published these stories in a book called High Spirits. And he's got this, oh my God, I'm trying to remember what the name of the story is now.
Mm.
I cannot remember the name of the story, but it's full of Canadian historical references. And
Okay.
it's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's like a great ghost story, but it's not real. Actually, it is mining the loneliness in a sense, but in this very self-deprecating Canadian way. Um, so I would say like Robertson Davies is probably not someone that the average person thinks of when they think of ghost stories for Christmas, but he actually did write quite a few, and they're quite good.
Oh,
So
he looks like Rasputin. I just found a picture of him. A huge
yeah,
beard.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I've not read any of his. I'll
yeah.
confess I've
And
not heard of that
actually, if
person.
you say that that it's a British tradition and it's not much of an American thing. There is actually, all those Valancourt books where they do like Christmas. Valancourt books has all these Christmas ghost story books.
Mm,
They've got like 6 or 7 of them, but they did one that's all American period Christmas ghost stories.
okay. I'll have to
Yeah,
check
so I
those out
don't
too.
know. I don't know that it's demarcated as such on the cover, but it's like volume 6 or something like that. It's like all American uh, Christmas ghost stories.
Um, well, I love that. I definitely
Yeah,
there's plenty of horror written by Americans, but, like, I
yeah,
definitely feel like there's room for,
yeah.
not that it needs it, like, we're good. We're good at stuff. We don't need
Yeah.
more.
But there is like it's not a tradition that stayed, obviously, because I think it was still, even though it's American, it's still very much inspired by,
Right.
the emigration of people from the UK bringing that tradition over here,
Yeah.
and then eventually kind of died out. But yeah, there's no reason why that tradition cannot
Mm-mm.
continue everywhere.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Talking about your film. Please, well, I just want to say as well, like I'm such a huge fan of your folk horror documentary and the subsequent huge giant box sets you've put out. Those are essential watchings, and also just like, thank you for being a a curator of these amazing movies.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I just am like, anytime there's a new box set, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So, what would you like to plug? Other, obviously the haunted season is on Shudder now. What else would you like
Yeah,
to plug?
the only other thing I'd say is that, I do a lot of my work for Severin Films, and it's their 20th anniversary next year. So I'm working on a bunch of exciting projects for that, and one of which is a film adaptation of the book Killing for Culture. David Korekis and David Slater wrote this book in 1994 called Killing for Culture, that's all looking at the history of Mondo films, snuff films, or the sort of mythology around snuff films, like tape trading of death films and stuff like this, and then they made a massive updated edition in like 2016 or something. Because the first edition didn't have it was before the internet, and obviously after the internet, this became a much bigger subsect of collectors and stuff like that. And so yeah, so I'm gonna be spending my next year watching very grim footage, and trying to make something out of it that won't be too uh too relentless to watch. So,
But if it is, like, it'll still be
yeah.
entertaining, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thank you all for listening. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.